Hi everybody, welcome back to the Eastfield Gunroom YouTube channel. And before we start today's review, once again, I want to keep saying thank you to everyone that's subscribing to the channel, requesting the reviews, watching the videos, liking on the videos, commenting on the videos. It's absolutely brilliant to see that we're engaging with so many people from all over the world. So please keep continuing to do that, and please keep remember to do the comments, send the review requests in, and we'll keep bringing you these fantastic videos. So I quite often boast about the fact that when I want to do a review, I'll go out and I'll find a particularly good example of a gun or a rare gun. And today we have got an absolute treat. Now, for those of you who watch the channel who are Beretta fans, I would imagine there's an awful lot of you, you will have no doubt seen one of these before. The chances are you will never, ever see one again in this condition. So the gun we're going to look at today, following on from the 682 Gold E review that we did, so check out the video. We're going back in time before then, and we're going to look at the 682 Supersport. Now, the 682 Supersport was a particularly interesting gun at the time, and I'll go through why in a minute. But basically, just to recap everyone's memories, the 682 is Beretta's out-and-out competition pedigree shotgun. So what I mean by that is it was only ever really designed for shooting clays. It was only made in sporting specification, trap specification, and skeet specification. Yes, it sat alongside the 686, 687 guns of the generation, but they were available in either a sporter or a game, whereas the 682, because of the weight and because of the balance and because of the feel of the gun, has always been an out-and-out clay shotgun. So the 682 was kind of the gun that put Beretta on the map worldwide, certainly on the competition circuit. The gun was launched initially and was sticking my neck out about 1985, 86. And to start with, it had a black action. It was available as a sporter, mostly in 28-inch, because again, in the late 80s, sporting clays was very, very much in its infancy. It was all about skeet. It was all about trap. And if you did buy a sport at the time, the chances are you would go for a shorter barrel and you would end up with something like a 28-inch. One of the guns that sticks in my head from the 682 range is the 682X. Now, back in the 80s again, 84, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever, trap shooting was still very, very popular here in the UK, double ride, ABT, DTL, and the 682X was a big old heavy thing. It got a step rib, Monte Carlo stock, and it was just so steady to shoot because, like I say, it weighed a ton. Again, this was probably before the days even Krieghoff broke onto the market, onto the down the line, the trap circuit, whatever. And at that time, it was no doubt dominated by the likes of Beretta 682Xs, Browning A1s, and of course the fabulous Miracus. So this one here is an out-and-out sporter, and this particular gun's a 1991 model. Now, again, the reason I've chose this one is because it is completely unaltered, it is completely original, and it is an exceptional example. If it comes to the point where we bring you a review and there's a pile of old crud on the table, it will basically mean that it's so rare, it's the only one we could find. Right, moving on. So 682 Supersport, it carried on from the original range of 682s, which was a plain black action. And in the early days as well, and I'm talking 86, 87, if you've got a Beretta from that era, you'll notice that the finish on the barrels is very different. And I believe it was actually painted before they started bluing them. Don't quote me on that, but if you've got one, you'll know what I mean, because it's completely different in its appearance to standard chemical bluing like we've got on this 682 Supersport here. The key difference for this gun over the standard 682, it was one of the first Beretta Sporters to have a tapered rib. Now, the rib on this gun is 10x8. And what you look at today's modern Berettas, 694, we've done a review on, check that out, 682 Goldie, bit older, but we've done that. All 10x8 tapered ribs. And this was the first model that I can recall to ever have a taper sporting rib in the Beretta competition sporting line. There's a mouthful. On top of that, it's got ported barrels. It's got factory ported barrels. Now, this gun was available with and without ported barrels. And now, to give people an indication of why barrels are ported, it's largely to do with muzzle flip and recoil. In the States, it is huge. I can remember people going over there in the 80s, 90s, noughties, and having their barrels ported at big competitions by Briley. Used to have a big trailer and they'd actually do it while they were there during the competition. quite different here in the UK, but there was a period, and going back to Miracle, for example, because I'm a huge fan of those, they produced a skeet gun with ported barrels, completely different porting. It was straight slots, about 1984, 85, and that was the 6000. And then Winchester did one. They did a 6500 with ported barrels, did a diamond grade with ported barrels. And to be honest with you, it's quite interesting that 1991, when this gun was made, the ported barrels were still popular because most of the models had been phased out. So, you could no longer buy a Marute with ported barrels. You could no longer buy a Winchester with ported barrels. But in the States, it's always been popular. It's always been, number one for muzzle flip, recoil reduction. And so I can only assume that Beretta looked at it and thought, look, we want a bit of this market. And they produced a factory ported gun. It's the only Beretta I can ever remember being factory ported, which again is why it's quite unique and quite interesting. I have actually seen people try and port their own barrels before by drilling holes into the barrels. I would recommend, if you do want to port your gun, you get it done by a qualified gunsmith rather than do with a Dremel. Okay, so it was interesting the fact that going towards 1990, 1991, they were still getting ported barrels, because this for me was probably the end of factory porting. I can't remember certainly seeing another model from Beretta, like I've said, and not one as late as this. So the 682 Sporter with the black action ran alongside the Supersport. Like I say, the Supersport, the primary difference was the tapered rib, the ported barrels, and also ventilated barrels, which I'm pretty certain a standard 682 had on, but don't quote me on that because I haven't seen one for a good while, to be fair. So from the top, it is a 680 series action. There's different manufacturing process to what Beretta produced today, but ultimately it is bulletproof, it is bomb-proof, it is the gun you will go and shoot when you learn to shoot at a shooting ground. They will have a rake of old 682s because they can just keep putting cartridges through them and they just keep going bang. It is as simple as that. The reason this gun has got such a huge following worldwide, and again, I talked about it in the Gold E video, you will still see guns like this used in the Olympics. There are certain countries that are very, very fond of this 682 range, whether it be the Gold E, the Gold, the original 682, and they are still used, particularly some of the skeet shooters. Yes, most of them have got DT10s, DT11 Krieghoffs, etc. But when you're starting off, if you want to shoot Olympic skeet, you can find yourself a 682 skeet gun. You will not go wrong because they are absolutely brilliant. So black action. Real sleek, real smart looking, and it's a little bit more glossy than the earlier 682s. When I go back to the 682X, like I mentioned, quite often it was kind of a matte finish, and if you put them side by side, you will see the difference. So this nice gloss bluing, and you've got the Beretta Trident logo on the bottom, which is the 3 arrow things, Beretta Guard Only VT, which is Guard Only Valtrompia, which is where they're manufactured, and you've got Supersport on the trigger guard. What's interesting with this particular example, because it is so good, all of the yellow writing, not gold, it was yellow, is still intact on the gun, which is testament to the fact that this gun has just not had any use. So that's the action. Another interesting point, which you may or may not know, with the older Berettas, and particularly with the 682s, the shoulders, let me just show you this, what I mean by the shoulders. Obviously, when you manufacture a gun that is designed to have a large shot count, a lot of use, it's important from a manufacturing point of view that longevity is key. Now, with these old 682s, the little shoulders here, which sit on the side of the barrel just below the engine turning, again, engine turning, exceptional. That's like factory fresh engine turning. To give you an indication how many times this gun's been put together, taken apart, this stuff is 1 micron thick. It's basically done with a little piece of dowel and a little piece of sandpaper. And as soon as you start using the gun, get a slight bit of grit in there. Even when you oil it, it will wear. So again, that shows that this gun has just had no use. Bit of boring trivia there for you. So these shoulders are actually replaceable. So the more the gun wears and the more the metal fatigue in terms of the breech and the lockup, you can actually get an oversized shoulder and replace it. Now, the idea with these shoulders in terms of replacement was to go alongside a new locking bolt. It does mean these guns will shoot millions and millions of cartridges, and that is not an exaggeration. You know, some of these guns produce mid-80s, obviously this one's a little bit later, still going strong, especially like I said at shooting grounds. It was kind of one of the guns that people just went to in terms of a workhorse, and that is the word I'm going to use on a shooting ground to teach people to shoot. And that is where it is. So that's the removable shoulders. Barrels, nominal board, 18.4, mobile Beretta chokes, as you would expect. Obviously, we've talked about the factory porting. This one has got a little brass bead on the end of the tapered rib. I'm not entirely sure that's original. I think it would have been a red one, but someone's obviously replaced it. Again, you can revert back to the original bead should you wish, should you own a gun like this. Obviously, it's 2.75" because of the age of the thing, and obviously it isn't steel shot proofed, although, you know, do take into account the fact that should you use the right chokes and the right cartridge, it will be fine with standard steel, no problem at all. Bread and butter 680 stuff. You've got your selector, you've got your safety catch. Quite a nice touch on some of the older Berettas. You've got this kind of stippled finish on the top of the top lever, which you don't tend to get anymore because most of them have got this kind of nickel finish. So it's black with this stippling, which I think is a nice touch. Then move on to the adjustable trigger, standard 682 stuff or 680 stuff, same as the gold, same as the 682, same as the Gold E. I say it time and time and time again, with a shotgun manufacturer, from their point of view, if it works, that's it. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it is as simple as that. Now, in terms of the stock, this is without a doubt the best one I've ever seen. The wood on this, which I'm going to use the word nutty, it looks typically Miracle-like. It looks like American walnut. In fact, I showed this gun to a guy and he said to me, that's not the original stock. It's absolutely the original stock. And I can recall only seeing a handful of Berettas of this kind of era that are stocked with that kind of wood. But to find one is a real needle in a haystack, which is another reason why I wanted to show you this gun. Stunning wood. And again, competition gun, strong in the head, figured at the bottom. That's exactly what you want. You want it to look pretty. You want it to have the wow factor, but it's got to be strong. It's got to be durable. We're talking about a gun that's going to shoot millions of cartridges throughout its life, and we want to retain the beauty, but at the same time, make sure it doesn't end up in half when you pull the trigger on a Sunday morning. No palm swell on this one. It's got a very slim, almost game kind of stock, and that's what they had. It was only the 682 trap guns that had a palm swell, and then when you moved up to the model, which was after this, which is the 682 Gold, which we'll look at in the future, they then started to put palm swells into their competition guns. Wooden butt plate. Again, it's something you don't tend to see. If you look at a Beretta Sporter from this era, it will normally have that little chamfered top, brown coloured butt plate. But on the Supersport, it came with a wooden butt plate. I have no idea why. The only thing I would say is with a wooden butt plate, it does slide nice and easily, and it doesn't tend to catch or snag on any kind of your clothing. So, to the all-important balance test. This gun weighs 7 pounds 9 ounces. This is a 28-inch. They did make them in 30-inch. They are both rare, but I would say the 30-inch is probably rarer with the ported barrels. With the non-ported, not quite so much. So, on the hinge pin, 7 pounds 9 ounces, and look at that. And that is what you're paying for in terms of a competition gun. When you've got a gun that balances like that, that is why, that's what makes it stand out from a standard sort of 686, 687. Schnabel forend, again, I've said in previous videos, at the time, it was the thing on a Sporter. You know, people didn't want anything different to that. They didn't want a beaver tail. They didn't, you know, rounded forends weren't really a thing. Although, interestingly, if you look at some of the nonsense that came out of Italy at the time, like Zanalettis and Ritmos and Cerezos, which, with the greatest respect to them, were mass-produced, poorly manufactured alloy action shotguns, they had some interesting design patterns for forend. So despite producing what was largely a load of garbage, they did actually pioneer some different forend designs. Enough about that. Right, so this gun, completely unaltered. Again, we've talked about Berettas in the past. When they've got a gold trigger, it doesn't take a lot of rubbing of a cloth to wear it off because it's gold washing at the end of the day. Again, it just shows that the gun has not had any use. One thing I do want to point out is the position of the top lever. Now, we're going to do a review series on what to look out for when you buy a second-hand shotgun. So this is just a sneak peek of that. Obviously, when you look at this, the top lever sits to the right hand side of where the back strap meets the stock. That's the back strap, the little black bit on the back with the safety catch and the selector. And the more wear the shotgun has, the less bite it has, and the further the top lever goes across. So if you are looking for a second-hand shotgun and you come across one you think you like the look of, and the top lever is over to the left, then the chances are that gun in the not too distant future is going to require some remedial work. One thing I will point out, reference to stock, is I've said that it was that kind of slim, gamey feel stock. Pretty low in the comb. I think this one is 3860. But again, it's interesting because during this era, there's always been different kind of schools, different kind of opinions on gun fit, which is again what we're going to talk about in detail. And a lot of people that were shooting at this kind of time would have sort of just what we would call, very soft mount, just touch the cheekbone onto the top of the comb. And because of that, they didn't really need high combs. And that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to that. But yeah, by modern standard, this would be quite low in the comb. You'd certainly be looking at 3 or 4 mil higher difference, certainly at the heel on a modern Beretta. But this is what they had back then, a bit slimmer, a bit lower, and a bit more gamey. Believe it or not, even though they were quite expensive, back in the day, they did not come in an ABS case. You had a cardboard box, such as, allow me to present a genuine 1989 Beretta cardboard box. And this is what you were greeted with when you handed over your many of hundreds, or probably not far off thousands of pounds for your new Beretta. A long way away from the ABS and plasticky cases we get today. So we've got some, look at that, Army Beretta polystyrene. Look at that way, there you go, Army Beretta. And inside you get, all the usual crud, booklets and things. And also, this is quite interesting as well, if you've owned an old Beretta, you will recognise this. God, they must have added 14 shipping containers, loads of these made, these little horrible plastic inserts. You got your chokes, and also not forgetting your choke key and thread cleaner, which again you don't get today. So in many ways we've kind of gone a little bit backwards, although looking at the dreadful cardboard box with the polythene, I think we'll stick to our case. Thank you. So to complete the package, I have actually added a Beretta ABS case of the period to this gun. It's no doubt been owned by a Beretta fanatic, and the reason I know that is because the combination locks are set at 682, 686 and 687. But this is exactly typical of the period of when this gun was manufactured, but this would have come with a higher grade gun like a 687 EL or something like that. At the time this was manufactured, if you wanted a case, you had to buy one. Again, when we try and source a gun, we try and get one that's got bit of provenance, bit of history, all the bits, and this is no exception. We've got the chokes in there. Like I said, it's the mobile choke, and interesting, Beretta used mobile chokes from 1982 up until about 4 or 5 years ago in some of the models, although they've gone over to Optima HP now, and prior to that it was kind of Optima across the clay range. They still used mobile chokes in the 686 silver pitching 1 game guns up until 4 or 5 years ago. So if we look inside the plastic bag of doom, look at that little bad boy, little skeet vest badge. Okay, got that. This is what would have been greeting you in the shop, hanging from the trigger guard, a little warranty card. And interestingly enough, it has actually got a proof certificate from Beretta. Now you don't get these anymore because I don't know why, but you don't get a specific Beretta proof certificate anymore. So that itself is quite an unusual thing to see and a nice bit of history. Owner's manual with the obligatory Italian flag, gun mark, which of course is what GMK were called prior to being called GMK. And then you've got your original Sovraposti, which is Italian for over and under. I should have taught Italian. Manual. And that is it. What a nice little thing. That has been the Beretta 682 Supersport with the ported barrels and the tapered rib. There might be a pop quiz on that later on. Absolute top draw from Beretta again. Late 80s, early 90s. You cannot buy guns like this in this condition. We completely pride ourselves here at Eastfield Gunroom on finding the best examples, the rarest guns that we can possibly find to bring to you. And this has been an absolute peach to do. Don't forget to comment below. Please keep liking or subscribing to the channel and liking the videos. Don't forget to check out the website. Any questions you got about this gun or any other gun, any other 682, etc., feel free to drop me an email, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon here at Eastfield Gunroom. Thanks for watching. Cheers.